The official descriptions for the player characters in Fallout games seem to indicate a solitary experience. The Chosen One, the Lone Wanderer, the Sole Survivor. In truth though, you never actually have to be alone. Since the very first Fallout game in 1997, players of all factions, of all reputations, of all playstyles and of all levels of karma have been able to recruit companions to keep them company on their adventures, to carry extra items, and to walk mindlessly into traps, killing you instantly. In short, companions are an integral part of the Fallout experience, though they're far from created equal.
So what makes a good companion? Well, a number of things. There's usefulness in combat, obviously. There's personality, as they're going to be travelling by our side for as long as we let them, and we naturally want to enjoy their company. There's also the unique experiences they provide in their respective games, whether they take the form of personal quests, unique skills, or otherwise unavailable choices they allow us to make. These are the factors we considered in making this list. But before we get to ranking every last one of them worst to best, a few ground rules.
Firstly, no temporary companions. If a companion accompanies you briefly on a journey between locations or only during a fixed sequence in the game, they don't count for our purposes.
Also, no companions you design yourself, which means we won't be considering every possible robot you can build with the Automatron DLC for Fallout 4.
And finally, no spin-off games. We could argue about whether Fallout 76 is a spin-off or a mainline game, but since it has no companions yet, the point is moot. Let's rank them. I'm Ben.
And I'm Peter from Triple Jump, and this is every Fallout companion ranked from worst to best.
Number 48. Preston Garvey, Fallout 4. Fair play to Preston, his heart is in the right place. He's attempting to rebuild the Minutemen, a band of good-hearted mercenaries seeking to restore order in the Commonwealth and trying to help civilization to rebuild. But he also never leaves us alone. Fallout 4's endless Radiant quests involve the game generating conflict out of nothing just to keep us playing. It will pick a settlement, pick a problem from a list, and give Preston Garvey the responsibility of marking it on our map, because, it's not like we might have been in the middle of anything else. In the Wasteland, ethical decisions should be cloudy. A true hero would understand that sometimes the life of one farmer they've never met is nothing compared to the countless lives that will be saved if they were to instead concentrate on their mission. Preston's black and white morality isn't just annoying, it's completely incompatible with the world we now occupy. And, you have a weapon yourself, Preston. You can rescue that kidnapped farmer if it's so important to you. Number 47. Pariah Dog, Fallout 2. The Pariah Dog is an easily missable companion in Fallout 2 as he only joins the player's party during a special encounter. When you find him, he's surrounded by corpses, suggesting that he might be absolutely brutal in a fight. Instead, though, you'll learn very quickly that he's, worthless. He gives you the Jinxed trait, which drops your luck to 1 and all but ensures that your skill failures will be critical. In short, your life will be miserable as long as you continue to travel with the Pariah Dog, and those bodies you found weren't killed by him in battle, but smothered by the dark cloud of his bad luck. The Pariah Dog is essentially a troll on the part of Fallout 2. He occupies a companion slot that could easily be put to better use, he refuses to participate in combat, he cannot be dismissed from your party, and his extremely high HP means he won't be leaving you through death anytime soon. It may seem a bit disrespectful to rank poor Preston below this guy, but the decision only took us about a minute, man. Number 46. Porter Gage, Fallout 4 Nuka World. There have been a number of great companions added in story DLC, but in only 3 cases would they follow you back to the main game. One of those cases is Porter Gage, who you'll find in the Nuka World DLC for Fallout 4. At first, Gage seems like a decent guy. If you survive Nuka World's opening gauntlet, which you will thanks to your unique ability to save and reload your game whenever you like, he tells you how to kill Overboss Coulter in battle, essentially saving your life in what was intended to be a fixed fight. But Gage doesn't do this out of the goodness of his heart. He's actually just dissatisfied in Coulter's regime and would prefer that someone else take over the raider wonderland of Nuka World. All of this is fine, and Gage is certainly a companion who can hold his own in a scrape, which is nice, but the problem is that Gage specifically wants Nuka World's new ruler to expand the raider presence in the Commonwealth. That is his only interest and only goal. Not exactly the most appealing option for anyone who invested a lot of time in building and maintaining settlements. Number 45. Myron, Fallout 2. It would be quite hard to make Myron less appealing as a companion. He's a boy genius, which is nice and everything, but he's one whose main hobby seems to be forcing himself on prostitutes, and I think we all know it doesn't take a genius to do that. He claims to have invented a highly addictive chem called Jet, and if that's true, then he has the deaths of many addicts on his conscience and probably shouldn't think as highly of himself as he clearly does. He's also openly bigoted, refusing to travel with the game's ghoul and super mutant companions. And if all of that weren't bad enough, under certain conditions, Myron will actually drug and sexually assault female player characters. He's also nearly useless in combat, which is certainly a drawback, but I think it's fair to say that even if this petulant boy were a powerhouse, we wouldn't have much interest in keeping him around.
Why, hello there, beautiful. What can Myron do for you?
Oh, I think I'm gonna be sick. Number 44. Strong, Fallout 4. Raw strength is welcome in Fallout Companions. The less you have to worry about fighting, the more you can worry about important things, like which Nuka-Cola trinkets you'd most like to display in the mansion you built for yourself while your settlers go hungry, or deciding where to store your 80th set of power armor that you'll never use. Strong is indeed strong, but personality is where he falls down. The Fallout series has a history of great super mutant companions, we'll get to those in a bit, but Strong feels genuinely unfinished. He speaks constantly of his desire to find the milk of human kindness, which, yes, we know is him taking literally a figure of speech from Macbeth, but you'd expect there to be some kind of quest in which he either learns the truth or finds something he mistakes for the actual milk of human kindness. It feels like a cut concept for a quest, especially since, unlike other companions in Fallout 4, Strong has no quest attached to him at all, making him feel less like a character than a pile of green meat with a catchphrase.
Strong hope we find milk of human kindness soon.
Number 43. Dogmeat, Fallout 3. What? Dogmeat is this low? Who are you? And why is your opinion so remarkably invalid? Now, before you start saying rude things about my mum, remember that while Dogmeat is perhaps the iconic Fallout companion, he's actually a different dog in each game. Here, we are talking about the Dogmeat we can meet and recruit in Fallout 3. As nice as it might feel to find him in the scrapyard area of the capital wasteland, the feeling is likely to turn sour some 5 minutes later when a mole rat kills him, because this incarnation of Dogmeat is made out of rice paper. Yes, the smartest thing to do upon recruiting Dogmeat is to fast travel directly to your home in Megaton, because you're all very good people who certainly didn't accept the home in Tenpenny Tower instead, and then leave him there. Players who purchase the Broken Steel DLC can afford to be a little less protective of their pooch, as that add-on comes with the Puppies perk, which replaces each slain Dogmeat with a brand new one, just as willing to die for your carelessness. And we can't decide if that's a relief or absolutely horrifying. Number 42. Skynet, Fallout 2. Fallout 2 is often criticised for a reliance on pop culture references for the sake of cheap recognition, and naming a self-aware AI after Skynet in the Terminator franchise is more or less par for the course. To recruit Skynet, players first have to complete a robo-brain, install an actual brain in the robot, and download Skynet's consciousness to it. Skynet's usefulness in combat comes mainly down to your choice of brain, but at its best, it can use a large amount of weapons and has the highest HP of any companion in the game. The downsides, though, are numerous. The quest to build a body for Skynet can be more trouble than it's worth, Skynet can't be healed in combat, and if Skynet catches you in a lie or doesn't like your attitude, he will outright murder one of your other companions. Oh, and because a robo-brain is basically a weapon in itself, many NPCs will automatically turn hostile when they see you wheeling it around, as if life in the wasteland wasn't hard enough. Number 41. X688, Fallout 4. It's quite easy to see the Institute as the bad guys in Fallout 4, as their methods are decidedly questionable even if you ultimately believe them to be the best hope for humanity's survival. And the baddest of these bad guys are the Coursers, combat-enhanced synths that do the Institute's dirty work throughout the Commonwealth. Having the ability to travel with one has obvious benefits, which is why X688 might seem like a great companion when you first meet him. Ultimately though, X688 comes with one severe limitation. He's not really an option unless you side with the Institute. This means that if you dislike the Institute's methods and decide not to help them, there's little you can do that X688 will appreciate, and he actively prevents you from working with the Brotherhood of Steel or the Railroad, meaning you won't be able to do enough quests for either of those factions to make an informed decision about the future of the Commonwealth. Now this may be by design, as the Institute surely wouldn't want you getting too chummy with factions that want to destroy it, but hitching your wagon to X688 locks you out of so much of the game that he's a genuine liability to the experience. Number 40. Robodog, Fallout 2. Fallout 2 is certainly the game to play if you're a big fan of disappointing dog companions. The generically named Robodog is your reward for helping Dr. Henry with his research. Dr. Henry, by the way, is the one doctor in the entire wasteland who won't heal you, so we're already off to a great start. Dr. Henry is interested in developing treatment for the forced evolutionary virus, which you probably recognize as that awful thing that turns innocent people into super mutants. A noble enough goal, but his proposed cure actually just melts subjects into a puddle of bubbling ooze, so the wasteland is no better as a result of your assistance. He does let you have Robodog though, which isn't even the only robotic dog companion you can get in the game. It is, however, the weakest, least useful one with the worst stats, so it's got that going for it. Number 39. Clover, Fallout 3. Female companions are relatively rare in the Fallout series, which is why it's a shame one of them is as useless as Clover. You can find her in the massive slaver community of Paradise Falls, which gives some indication of just how pleasant a companion she's going to be. In fairness to her though, she's likely suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, demonstrated by her loyalty to Eulogy Jones, the slaver who keeps her for his personal services. And sure enough, Clover doesn't come to her senses if you recruit her as a companion, being just as blindly loyal and flirtatious to you as she was to the guy who robbed her of her freedom in the first place. Of course, it doesn't help that you recruit her by buying her from Eulogy Jones, essentially reinforcing her permanent identity as a slave, but let's not dwell on that. Clover isn't much help in a fight, and has no chance to become a better version of herself during the events of the game. Traveling with her can make you feel kind of yucky, and frankly that's exactly how you should feel. Number 38. Sulik, Fallout 2. Sulik is one of a large number of companions in Fallout 2, and he has difficulty measuring up to most of them. His most unique feature is his tribal design, with markings all over his skin and a bone through his nose, but sadly that's the most interesting thing about him. When we meet Sulik, he's in debt to hotel owner Maida Buckner for wrecking up her establishment, and you can either pay off his debt or do some quests for her to earn Sulik as a companion, but you'll likely find that your efforts are better spent on recruiting somebody else. He's not especially useful in combat anyway, and the bulk of his storyline was cut from the game before release. Sulik is in search of his sister, who was abducted by slavers, and assisting him in his quest to find and free her would have gone a long way toward justifying his existence as a companion. Instead, she was cut from Fallout 2 completely, Sulik's tale has no closure, and there's very little reason to bother with him. Number 37. Katja, Fallout. When we first meet Katja in an area referred to as the Boneyard, we might well conclude she's going to be a perfect companion. She seems to have street smarts, she has a personal understanding of several of the local factions, she acts tough, and she's looking to explore the larger world. All of this sounds great. Once we enter combat with her though, it becomes clear why she's had to wait so long for someone to finally take her on their adventures. Katja has the lowest HP in the game and is a melee character, meaning she's constantly running directly towards enemies that are all too happy to gun her down easily. She seems like the kind of person who lives for adventure, but far more frequently she dies for it. Katja may have an interesting backstory and tales to tell, but we never hear them. The one bit of personal information we do learn is that she hates dogs, and yeah, dying constantly is one thing, but hating dogs is inexcusable. Number 36. Sergeant RL3, Fallout 3. Sergeant RL3 is a Mr. Gutsy, a combat-focused variant on the Mr. Handy, and a hell of a good thing to have on your side in a fight. His main downside is his enthusiasm for combat, which makes him a liability for stealth characters, but the same pretty much goes for all companions anyway. As one of many recruitable robots throughout these games, Sergeant RL3 doesn't really stand out. Rather than encountering him during a quest, you just need to buy him from a vendor named Tinker Joe, and keeping him as a companion requires you to maintain neutral karma, which is easier said than done, as it requires players to vacillate between good and evil actions throughout the game, something that may not quite come naturally. Sergeant RL3 is worth his 1,000 cap asking price as a combat utility, but don't expect to get much out of travelling with him beyond that. Number 35. Dogmeat, Fallout 4. Fallout 4's Dogmeat is superior to his Fallout 3 counterpart based on the simple fact that he can survive a strong breeze. But that's not the only difference. Dogmeat plays a crucial role in helping you track down your missing son, meaning he's actually integrated into the plot, a stark difference from the very missable canine companion in Fallout 3. What's more, you can give him adorable dog armor in this game, which I'm sure you'll agree makes him a good boy indeed. It's a little disappointing though that Fallout 4 throws a number of companions at you right out of the gate, or I suppose right out of the vault. If you follow the main questline, you'll meet Codsworth, Dogmeat, and Preston Garvey in quick succession, giving them little time to make individual impressions. Of the three, I think it's fair to say that Dogmeat is the poorest conversationalist, and his forced companionship makes his recruitment feel less significant than it did in the other games. Number 34. Old Longfellow, Fallout 4, Far Harbor. Old Longfellow, the companion whose name writes its own jokes, was introduced in the Far Harbor DLC for Fallout 4. The novelty of travelling with a post-apocalyptic pensioner is reason enough to recruit him, but he's also a valuable source of information about Far Harbor, having spent so much time there. The reason he's relatively low on the list, though, is that his implementation feels a bit careless. When a player installs a new DLC, they're going to want to throw themselves into the experience, using the new weapons and travelling with the new companion. Even the story of Far Harbor encourages you to keep Old Longfellow by your side, as the dangerous fog that coats the island makes it difficult to navigate without someone who knows the area. The problem here is that Far Harbor is actually an important part of Nick Valentine's story, and you can't travel with both at the same time. Travelling with Old Longfellow means you'll miss a large number of unique interactions and a lot of insight you would have had with Nick. Ironically, travelling with the DLC's unique companion actually has you missing out on a lot of the DLC's unique content, and that is unfortunate. Number 33. Jericho, Fallout 3. The moment players of Fallout 3 leave Vault 101, they see just how far civilization has fallen, and the nearby settlement of Megaton both suggests that humanity can rebuild and underscores just how awful life is now. Jericho, one of the residents of Megaton, illustrates both halves of that equation perfectly. As a former raider, he has a history of murder, torture, theft, and God knows what else, but now, however, he helps protect Megaton and keep it safe from those who might wish to disturb the town. That makes it sound as though he's gone straight, but he really hasn't. He's retained a good amount of his old habits, and we can even learn that he attempted to sexually assault one of the other settlers. He's a pretty crappy guy, and the fact that he's our first recruitable companion in the game speaks volumes. For better or worse, Jericho is what humanity is now. They do terrible things or helpful things depending upon what serves their own interests. Jericho is good in a fight, which is helpful for low-level characters, but it's hard to look at Jericho, at the reality of what humanity has become, and not conclude that we can do better.
Number 32. Raul Tejeda, Fallout New Vegas. In theory, Raul the Ghoul should be a riveting companion. He survived the Great War, travelled from Mexico to the Mojave, and has seen society at its absolute worst. He also has both a history as a gunslinger and an important skill as a repairman. In practice though, Raul is surprisingly dull. We meet him working at, well, technically enslaved at Black Mountain Radio, and if we save him from the insane disc jockey Tabitha, he's so grateful he'll tag along for our adventures. It isn't long though before we realise that voice actor Danny Trejo isn't playing a centuries-old gunslinger ghoul, he's playing voice actor Danny Trejo. There seems to be a major gap between Trejo's level of interest in the character and the level of interest a player is meant to feel, as Raul's personal quest doesn't involve anything more than talking to a bunch of NPCs in his presence. Raul will begin to question his own direction in life and come to a definitive conclusion conclusion about who he wants to be. A definitive conclusion you can then easily overrule with a speech check. Not exactly a riveting character. Number 31, John Cassidy, Fallout 2. Like Sulik, whom we've already discussed, John Cassidy was a victim of cut content in Fallout 2. Unlike Sulik though, he's still a heck of a welcome companion. He's grizzled, scarred, and cursed with a serious heart condition he's unable to treat properly, but he's also a great guy with a strong sense of ethics. We meet him in Vault City, where he runs a tavern called the Spittoon, and we learn that guards conducted an unfounded raid on his business, confiscating his alcohol supply and arresting his customers. It's enough to convince him to move on, which is convenient, as we've got space for someone with his skills and honest demeanour in our party anytime. If we're thorough in our explorations, we might even find some heart pills for John, but they don't actually help his condition at all. It's been speculated that these would have been used to cure him in a stage of his personal quest that was cut, and while it's a shame we can't help him and have to make sure we keep the chems away, none of that makes him less than a welcome addition to our crew. Number 30, Rex, Fallout New Vegas. Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 76 are the only mainline Fallout games to not include some incarnation of dog meat. New Vegas, though, gave us Rex, the cybernetic hound dog owned by a gang of post-apocalyptic Elvis impersonators. Rex has a surprising amount of backstory, including the fact that he served as a police dog in Denver, Colorado, an area that was meant to be explored in the original pre-Bethesda concepts for Fallout 3. So far, we've never visited Rex's hometown in Fallout, but New Vegas does give us the chance to determine his fate. When we meet the poor old dog, barely held together by robotic implants, his aging brain is rapidly degrading. There is a doctor in the Mojave Wasteland willing to do a transplant, and your choice of replacement brain will affect Rex's personality and the perks you get from travelling with him. To this end, Rex represents the most complex and versatile canine companion on our list, but he's still not our favourite. Stay tuned. Number 29, Davin and Myria, Fallout 2. Modoc is a town inhabited by interesting people, and one of the most interesting situations you can find yourself in involves Davin, or Davin, and his sister Myria, or Miria. This is all very confusing in a game with limited voice acting. We're covering Davin and Myria together because they're similar in their stats and identical in their recruitment methods, though which one you prefer is entirely up to you, as it involves sleeping with one of them and being forced at gunpoint by their father to then marry them. This is a slightly different situation than with most companions, and it's nice that you can marry either sibling irrespective of your character's gender, but neither Davin nor Myria are especially useful in combat. Davin is a bit stronger and Myria is better with guns, but as with most shotgun weddings, you'll quickly be looking for a way out. Thankfully, you have a number of options, from divorce to killing them, to harvesting their brains, to selling your spouse to slavers. Have we mentioned that Fallout 2 is a dark game? Fallout 2 is a dark game. Number 28, Ian, Fallout. Those who play the Fallout games in release order are quite likely to recruit Ian as their very first companion of all. That's for two reasons. Firstly, Ian resides in Shady Sands, which is invariably the first settlement players find in Fallout, as it's directly between their starting location of Vault 13 and their first destination, Vault 15. Secondly, recruiting him requires nothing more than handing him enough money. Ian is memorable for being an extremely helpful early game character, effectively doubling the player's firepower right out of the gate and splitting the attention received from hostiles. He's even decently strong and likely to survive the entire game, so long as you exercise appropriate caution. Of course, it would be nice if Ian exercised some caution himself. Likely due to sloppy coding, Ian is extremely careless with firearms, especially burst weapons, being very likely to gun down the player character and innocent bystanders while trying to attack hostiles. This unfortunate behaviour was ultimately recognised by the developers themselves, who retroactively made it part of his personality. In Fallout 2, which takes place 80 years later, you can have a conversation with an NPC about a legendary companion who just couldn't shoot straight. Oh, Ian. Number 27, Deacon, Fallout 4. Love them or hate them, the members of the Railroad are pretty easy to read. Their only true goal is to keep synths who have escaped from the Institute safe from the coursers sent to retrieve them, which makes Deacon a notable standout. At first, he seems like a slightly cooler version of any other Railroad agent, but soon informs you of a crucial secret, that he's really the faction's leader, posing as a mere member in order to throw off assassins. Actually, he was just lying. In reality, he's a synth, and he will give you his recall code as a gesture of good faith, pleading with you never to use it. Of course, you will use it, and when you do, you'll learn that that was a lie too. Deacon's endless lying prevents even his own faction from truly knowing him. Desdemona, the Railroad's actual leader, even suspects him of secretly being one of the group's founding members. The truth is that the tall tales he weaves are a defense mechanism to distance himself from his own violent past as a gang member and the memories of his murdered wife. In short, he's doing exactly what you do when you play a Fallout game, creating an identity and role-playing his way through life. Number 26, Ada, Fallout 4 Automatron. Moving on to an actual robotic companion in Fallout 4, Ada is genuinely one of the most useful and functional tag-alongs in the entire series. Of course, this is largely due to the fact that she's almost completely customizable. If you install the Automatron DLC, you'll gain access to a robot workbench and a wealth of options to construct your own robotic buddies from scratch. Ada admittedly exists to serve as a tutorial for robot customization, but she does have her own goals, that is to hunt down whoever slayed the kind humans with whom she was travelling, and she leads us through one of the best quests in the entire game. Once we upgrade Ada and use her to infiltrate the lair of the Heartless Killer, we just might discover that this has all been a big misunderstanding, but not without also discovering just how capable Ada is against powerful foes, and learning that whatever our playstyle is, she can be modified to complement it perfectly. Number 25, Arcade Gannon, Fallout New Vegas. One of the few genuinely good-hearted people in the entire wasteland, Arcade Gannon is right at home with the followers of the Apocalypse, a peaceful faction dedicated to medicine, knowledge, and preventing a repeat of the Great War that almost wiped out humanity. His wide range of knowledge can help you bypass phases of certain quests, and his skills with medicine come in handy as well. He's also one of the few canonically gay characters in the series, which is a welcome exception to the rule. In short, Arcade Gannon is a pleasant and reliable guy to travel with, which makes it all the more disturbing that you can dispose of him in one of the cruelest ways. Rather than just killing him or selling him to slavers, you can give him to Caesar, whose beliefs and methods he loathes, and force him to live the rest of his life as the despot's personal doctor. Nice. Number 24, K9, Fallout 2. The superior choice of robot dog companion in Fallout 2 is K9, the pet project of the heartless Enclave scientist Dr. Schreiber. At first, K9 just seems to be a broken or incomplete robotic dog, but thorough players will soon learn the truth. Dr. Schreiber attempted to program advanced intelligence into his robot dog, which allowed it to also develop a sense of morality. The newly woke K9 did then not approve of Dr. Schreiber's inhumane experiments and voiced his displeasure. I mean, literally, as in the dog could talk. Did I not mention that? And Dr. Schreiber disabled K9's movements as punishment. Now it stands motionless against the wall in Schreiber's lab, forced to watch every unethical experiment unfold in real time. As they say, dogs are excellent judges of character, which means we should execute Dr. Schreiber on sight, and once we do, we can restore K9's mobility. Then, so long as our character doesn't have their own history of monstrous behaviour, we're free to take our talking robot dog for walkies. Or talkies, maybe. Walkie-talkies? Number 23, Codsworth, Fallout 4. Codsworth, a Mr. Handy robot, is one of a small number of characters you get to interact with both before and after the world ends. Prior to the apocalypse, he putters around your house performing basic tasks. After the apocalypse, he's pretty much doing the same thing. As a mass-produced robot, Codsworth doesn't have much in the way of a distinct personality, but he does serve as an important point of familiarity for the main character, who just lost his or her home, family, and the world they once knew in what feels like one fell swoop. It's nice to see him again, and nicer still that he's willing to fight alongside you almost as soon as the game begins. Of course, none of this covers Codsworth's main selling point, the fact that his fully voiced dialogue allows him to verbally call you by name in conversation, or call you a large number of words we can't say on Triple Jump. The choice is yours, really. Number 22, Vic, Fallout 2. A chubby, balding trader, and traitor to an extent, Vic is one of the earliest characters you'll meet following the main questline of Fallout 2, and he's also one of the sturdiest companions. He has a high repair skill and is great with guns, making him a very valuable early recruit. He also has an interesting personal history, as he's a bit of a ladies' man. He was smitten with a resident of Vault City and had a child with her, but preferred fighting for his life every day in the wasteland to settling down, which probably says something. By the time we encounter him in the den, he has something going on with Jenny, one of the local prostitutes. He does care about his daughter though, and we can take a moment out of our travels to reunite them, whereupon they get into an argument, but, we tried. Vic isn't the most noble companion in the series. He's imprisoned for knowingly selling faulty goods, but he's a good guy at heart, and he possesses exactly the kind of sliminess that we find endearing. Number 21, Star Paladin Cross, Fallout 3. The Brotherhood of Steel seems to follow the whims of its leadership more than it follows one consistent dogma. Leaders throughout the games have been focused on securing technology, on conquering regions, on isolationism, and in Fallout 3, on humanitarianism. Star Paladin Cross is that humanitarianism personified, dedicating her life and service to helping the people of the Capital Wasteland. She doesn't help them in small ways either by providing temporary shelter or protection. She's involved in all stages of Project Purity, a large-scale water purification effort that could, without exaggeration, save humanity. She worked side by side with your celebrated father, James, arguably the only truly selfless human being in Fallout 3, and ferried both him and his child, that's you, to Vault 101, where you could be raised and cared for in safety. Now that you're older, she's still ready and willing to protect you as you go about completing your father's noble work. Number 20, Dogmeat, Fallout. When it comes to ranking the pooches of the Fallout universe, you just can't beat the original Dogmeat. The imagery of a Fallout hero wandering the wastelands with his faithful mutt can be traced right back to this very good boy from the first game, though admittedly you meet him while he's being a very bad boy. Dogmeat is found in Junktown, terrorizing an innocent man named Phil and keeping him from entering his home. The reason is that Dogmeat is in a tizzy that his owner is dead. An inquisitive player can learn that his owner dressed a heck of a lot like Mel Gibson in Mad Max, and if you have or find a similar leather jacket, Dogmeat will leave Phil alone and begin following you instead. This original version of Dogmeat is actually pretty resilient, and as long as you don't allow enemies to gang up on him, he stands a pretty good chance of making it a long way into the game. Dogmeat proved so popular with the developers and players that a canine companion has become a recurring feature of the series, typically sharing the Dogmeat name. Number 19, Hancock, Fallout 4. The ghoul mayor of Goodneighbor, Hancock has more of a history than you might first suspect. He's the brother of Mayor McDonough of Diamond City, who implemented a zero-tolerance no-ghoul policy, sending Hancock and many others in search of a new place to live. While Goodneighbor isn't the safest settlement today, it was far worse then, as it was run by a corrupt mobster who killed anyone who got in his way. Hancock overthrew him, seized control, and made Goodneighbor a safer and more welcoming place for the Wasteland's outcasts. One interesting interesting thing is that Mayor McDonough is a synth, meaning neither brother is human anymore, and their memories of each other are from different incarnations entirely. Hancock does have issues with substance abuse, and stabbing troublemakers in the street is one way he likes to keep order, but hey, nobody's perfect. Hancock is also the only romanceable ghoul companion in the whole series, and we don't know what could ensure a respectable placement on this list more than that. Number 18, Ed E, Fallout New Vegas. Fans of Fallout 3 likely recognise iBots as the cute little things flying around delivering less cute Enclave propaganda. They probably never seemed like something that could serve as a great companion, but Fallout New Vegas proved that at least one of them can. In a way, New Vegas can be seen as Ed E's story. In the game's trailer, we see him flying along a highway getting shot several times by an off-camera sniper. Then in the game itself, we learn the importance of that journey. Ed E was actually constructed in the Capital Wasteland all the way on the East Coast. He's loaded with valuable technical data and dispatched to Navarro on the West Coast. Thanks to that sniper in the trailer though, he doesn't quite make it, and we find him in a state of disrepair in the small town of Prim. The Lonesome Road DLC, the last one released for New Vegas and arguably the climax of the courier's story, involves Ed E quite heavily, with the companion being necessary at several points to progress through the divide. It can even end, depending upon your choices, with Ed E nobly sacrificing himself for the greater good.
Number 17, Kate, Fallout 4. You can recruit Kate in a brutal fighting establishment called the Combat Zone, which means you know up front that she can handle herself in a scrape. What you don't know is that Kate grew up in a physically and emotionally abusive home, with her own parents selling her into slavery at a young age. It was a harrowing enough experience that she turned to chems, alcohol, and fighting to detach herself from her memories and her past. She also tracked her parents down and killed them, which in this case I'm sure you'll agree qualifies as a good karma decision. It can be difficult to see Kate as a pleasant companion at first, as her brusque demeanour and hardened heart makes her seem to pair poorly with a wasteland hero, but once she starts to trust you enough to open up about her history, she becomes a much different character altogether. This is especially true after you complete her personal quest, which sees you escorting her to Vault 95, where you can use Vault-Tech's equipment to cure her addiction to chems, and it turns the site of one of Vault-Tech's most atrocious experiments into one of genuine healing. Number 16, Piper, Fallout 4. Fallout 4 overall has a strong emphasis on rebuilding communities after hundreds of years of society going down the toilet, and much of that is reflected in the game's companions. Whether you're helping Kate rebuild her life without chem addiction, or helping Piper back into Diamond City so she can continue with her important work as the voice of the free press, you are helping society get back on its feet, one wastelander at a time. Unlike other examples though, Piper's spirit doesn't seem to be in much danger of being crushed. She knows as well as anyone else that the odds are stacked against her, but she's willing to go down swinging, even when it means picking fights with authority figures.
You devious, rabble-rousing slanderer. The level of dishonesty in that paper of yours. I'll have that printer scrapped for parts.
When you meet her, she's run afoul of Mayor McDonough, leader of the largest and safest community in the Commonwealth. He's banished and threatened to shut down the newspaper she runs, all because Piper ran an article accusing McDonough of secretly being a synth. McDonough dismisses this as fake news, even though it turns out to be entirely true, which I'm sure you'll agree ended up having no real-life resonance whatsoever. Number 15. Tycho, Fallout. Players get roped into determining the outcomes of other people's conflicts in Fallout all the time, but one of the most memorable occasions takes place in the appropriately named Junk Town. The conflict here is between Mayor Killian Darkwater and crooked casino mogul Gizmo. In many cases throughout Fallout, the ethically correct choice isn't always clear. Here though, it's a choice between a good-hearted man who wishes to keep his citizens safe and a sneering evil doughboy who hires assassins to gun down anyone who stands in his way. If you do find yourself on the right side of the law with the intention of stopping Gizmo, you can recruit Tycho to your party. Tycho is heartened to hear of your desire to restore order to Junktown, likely due to his background as a desert ranger. We don't learn much about the desert rangers in this game, but they were a central focus of 1988's Wasteland, the spiritual predecessor to Fallout, and they would again play a major role in New Vegas. As such, Tycho serves as connective tissue between all three eras of Fallout's history: the Wasteland series, the original Interplay games, and the 3D era. Number 14. Butch DeLoria, Fallout 3. As easy as it is to despise Butch at the beginning of Fallout 3, it's even easier to pity him as the game progresses. Introduced as your childhood tormentor, Butch is a thorn in your side all throughout your time in Vault 101. He even starts his own gang, the Tunnel Snakes, seemingly for no other reason than to cause more problems for the other Vault dwellers. What a brilliant guy! Then, you leave the vault, massive spoilers we know, sorry, and discover that compared to the truly monstrous residents of the Wasteland, Butch was something of a pussycat. A bit of an arse of a pussycat, but still. Later in the game you'll have an opportunity to return to Vault 101 and find it in the midst of crisis. Should the Vault dwellers follow you into the Wasteland at the resolution of this crisis, you can find the woefully underprepared Butch drinking away his troubles in Rivet City. Recruiting him as a companion is almost an act of mercy, as his 1950s American greaser facade won't get him far in a land of murderers and cannibals. We have to admit it feels quite good to take our former bully under our wing and start calling the shots for once. Number 13. Paladin Danse, Fallout 4. When you meet Paladin Danse, he is fanatically devoted to the Brotherhood of Steel. What Danse doesn't know is that he's actually a synth. Doing a bit of espionage on behalf of the Brotherhood brings this truth to light and understandably puts the Brotherhood in an awkward position. What follows is a genuine personal crisis for Danse, who suddenly finds out that his entire life and history has been a lie and is just some data implanted into him by the Institute, who he's always understood to be the enemy. You're instructed by the Brotherhood to track down and execute Danse, leading to a fairly difficult ethical decision, made somehow even more difficult by the fact that Danse himself wants you to do it, feeling so much loyalty to the Brotherhood that he'd side with them even when it means his life. Typically, companions give you an edge in combat and provide some amusing banter along the way, but Paladin Danse is one of the very few that reveals a complex wrinkle in what you initially thought was clear and straightforward. Number 12. Cass, Fallout New Vegas. We meet the daughter of Fallout 2 companion John Cassidy in the Mojave Wasteland, as she has inherited both her father's heart problems and his misfortune in business. Cass runs Cassidy Caravans, and you'll likely meet her after the owner of the Crimson Caravan Company asks you to seek her out and make her an offer for her failing business. It should be an easy sale. Poor Cass has experienced a seemingly endless series of setbacks lately, but if we do some investigating, we can discover that a few other caravan companies have run into trouble as well. With Cass's help, we learn that the Crimson Caravan Company is behind a series of attempts to run other caravans out of the area, and we can either side with Cass or betray her, but we'll side with her, obviously, to avoid being repulsed every time we see ourselves in the mirror. The hard-drinking, no-nonsense Cass represents New Vegas at its best, right down to her story mirroring yours. It's a tale of personal revenge, playing out against a much larger backdrop of building conflict. Everyone is taking sides, and Cass is a great person to have on yours. Number 11. Boone, Fallout New Vegas. You first meet gifted sniper and beret enthusiast Craig Boone hiding out in a big dinosaur, which alone would earn him a high spot on our list. In addition though, he's extremely useful in combat and has one of the most affecting personal stories in the entire series. He once served as a soldier in the NCR and took part in the Bitter Springs Massacre, a heinous event in which flawed information and poor leadership led his battalion to slaughter a town of unarmed innocents.
It was all wrong though. Women, kids, elderly. Wounded started coming through too. We radioed to confirm our orders, but command didn't get what we were seeing.
Permanently and understandably disturbed by his role in the massacre, he finds some semblance of happiness again when he meets and marries a woman named Carla. But because this is Fallout and happiness simply does not belong here, she is betrayed by a fellow resident of Novak and sold as a slave to Caesar's Legion. Lacking the firepower to rescue her but unable to abandon her to this fate, Boone shoots and kills Carla from a distance. We can help Boone exact revenge on the treacherous neighbor who ruined his life for the second time, but we can't do anything about the memories he'll carry with him always. Number 10. Charon, Fallout 3. It's easy to feel sympathy for the non-feral ghouls in the Fallout universe. Thoroughly disfigured by radiation and any number of wasteland conflicts, they have retained their humanity and intelligence enough that they understand their status as lower-class citizens and are powerless to change it. They're enslaved, mistreated, and marginalized by wastelanders who really should be working together if they ever intend to build a functional society. In the capital wasteland, non-feral ghouls have congregated in Underworld, a settlement built within the remains of the Museum of History. It's there that we meet poor Charon, a ghoul in indentured servitude to another ghoul, which must be truly insulting. Unlike most other Fallout 3 companions, Charon is actually rather capable in combat, and recruiting him requires only buying out his contract from nasty bar owner Azrukal. The moment he is no longer under Azrukal's employ, Charon will walk over to him and shoot him to death, which gives you some idea of how the poor guy was treated. It's one of the most genuinely cathartic moments in the game, and it's worth recruiting him for that alone.
Number 9. Lily Bowen, Fallout New Vegas. Lily Bowen is a Nightkin, a kind of super mutant created by the Master in the first Fallout game. She and a few other remnants of the Master's army relocate to the Mojave after his fall and start life anew, which is a lovely thought, especially for Lily, who was already 75 years old before she was mutated with the forced evolutionary virus. Nightkin are almost uniformly more intelligent than standard super mutants, but they're also susceptible to mental illness, something another character believes is due to the Nightkin's frequent use of Stealth Boy invisibility devices. During your travels, Lily will reminisce about her long-dead grandchildren and speak to a mysterious presence named Leo, who evidently tells her to do violent things. This is a result of the fact that she hasn't properly been taking her antipsychotics, and it makes for an unexpected ethical dilemma. Do you encourage her to take her medication, which keeps her free from Leo but also dims the memories of her beloved grandchildren, or do you allow her to stay sick but retain possession of the few memories that bring her joy? As with so much else in New Vegas, there is no correct answer, which we find as horrible as it is brilliant. Number 8. MacCready, Fallout 4. A number of familiar faces pop up in Fallout 4, but the most welcome has got to be MacCready, who we remember as the foul-mouthed child mayor of Little Lamplight in Fallout 3. By the time we reconnect with him in the Commonwealth, he's a very different person, though he's just as hard-nosed and mischievous as ever. We can recruit this older version of MacCready, and it's worth doing so. Years of mercenary work have allowed the young man to develop incredible marksmanship, to the point that we get an extremely handy perk after completing his quest, allowing us to more easily make headshots. He's a fun companion to travel with, but he isn't in the Commonwealth for happy reasons. After leaving Little Lamplight, he met a woman named Lucy and had a child with her. They lived together until Lucy was killed in an attack by feral ghouls, and their son Duncan was taken ill by a mysterious disease. We can help MacCready find a cure in our travels, but we never find out if it works. Whatever happens, MacCready is a changed man, even cleaning up his vocabulary so he won't pass his bad habit down to his son. All things considered, by Wasteland standards, MacCready is a shoo-in for Father of the Year, and who wouldn't want to spend their time wandering post-apocalyptia with a guy who surely has some excellent dad jokes up his sleeve. Number 7. Lenny, Fallout 2. Our favourite of all the ghoul companions is the one who is a doctor and can heal our crippled limbs on command. Who'd have thought? Though we can recruit Lenny in Fallout 2, we actually came close to meeting him in Fallout 1. In that game, we discover Necropolis, an entire city of ghouls. Necropolis has the water chip we desperately need, but taking it would doom the residents to death by dehydration. Canonically, we repaired a water pumping system so that Necropolis would no longer need the water chip, saving both them and Vault 13. Lenny was one of the ghouls in Necropolis at that time, and he was so inspired by your heroic example that he set out into the wasteland to do some good of his own, regretting that he never asked us in Fallout 1 if he could tag along. When we meet him in Fallout 2, he knows better than to let the opportunity pass him by again, and he offers himself up as a companion. He's a great addition to the party, though it's a shame that plans to let him become a glowing one were eventually scrapped, as we still haven't had a glowing one companion to this day. Number 6. Goris, Fallout 2. Goris is a talking Deathclaw. If you didn't think that alone would qualify him for our top 10, you're out of your mind. He is a resident of Vault 13, which may sound familiar, as that's exactly where we were in the previous game, and he uses the terminals there to study human history. As a budding Deathclaw sociologist, the subject is of great interest to him. Because he's only able to learn so much from terminals, Goris frequently travels the wasteland in pursuit of knowledge. To avoid being engaged in combat though, he dresses in dark robes and claims to be disfigured, which, fortunately for him, is a pretty believable claim in the post-apocalypse. He does reveal his true form in combat though, tearing off his robe like a professional wrestler with the most impressive gimmick in the history of the sport. When someone plays any of the Fallout games for the first time and encounters a Deathclaw, without exception, their first thought is, I'd like to be friends with that thing and engage with it in measured conversation. And Goris, we're pleased to report, makes that dream come true. Number 5. Fawkes, Fallout 3. When humans become super mutants due to exposure to the forced evolutionary virus, it's almost always at the cost of their intellectual capacity. Fawkes, however, was lucky. Well, if you count being locked away in a cell for years upon years by other super mutants who are jealous and frightened of his intelligence as lucky. Trapped in Vault 87, shunned by the rest of his kind for not being an immoral, violent monster, Fawkes whiled away the years studying history, literature, science, and pretty much anything else he could find. He'd probably get on pretty well with Goris, to be honest. Of course, in time, the other super mutants smash the terminal to pieces just to upset him, because that's the kind of scallywags they are. When you find him in Vault 87, he will not only help you retrieve an important quest item from a room with deadly levels of radiation, but he will follow you into the wasteland and kick 7 shades of Brahmin dung out of anything that gets in your way. Meeting Fawkes is a small indication that even in the darkest recesses of post-nuclear horrors, some goodness can still potentially be found if you look hard enough. Number 4. Curie, Fallout 4. Let's be clear right out of the gate here. Curie is adorable. We find her in Vault 81, the residents of which were intended to be used as part of a heinous experiment. The Overseer couldn't bring himself to let it happen though, and instead sealed these scientists off from the residents. When we show up, that seal is still in place, and by exploring, we can find Curie, the lone remaining researcher. Curie is a Miss Nancy robot, reprogrammed to serve as a lab assistant, and when we find her, she is excited to begin researching the world properly outside of the vault. Once she's reached the limit of what she can learn as a Miss Nancy though, she desires a more human body, which we can indeed provide to her by loading her consciousness into a synth. This version of Curie, with her wholesome French accent and sweet naivete, is a delight to travel with, not least because she's able to see the wasteland as something more than just a reminder of what humanity has lost. She's a fun companion for those who enjoy a bit of light humour in their adventures, and in her synth body, she's actually one of the most durable companions in the game.
And see, now my head goes ever more. Spin, spin, spin.
Number 3. Marcus, Fallout 2. Like Lenny, Marcus is another character we find out we nearly met in Fallout 1. Marcus was one of the Master's most loyal and dedicated super mutants, and the death of the Master and destruction of the forced evolutionary virus caused him great dismay. This isn't because Marcus is evil, but rather because he genuinely believed the Master was humanity's best hope for the future. Understanding and respecting his adversaries was something important to Marcus. After the Master's fall, he met and fought Jacob, a member of the Brotherhood of Steel. They both held their own so well in battle though that they stopped fighting out of respect and became close friends, often discussing civilization and philosophy together. They even founded the settlement of Broken Hills, which is where we meet Marcus acting as town sheriff. Marcus is an absolute powerhouse in battle, but he does tend to get too excited to realise he's gunning us down along with the bad guys. He also appears as a non-recruitable character in New Vegas as founder of another settlement, Jacobstown, named after his old Brotherhood friend. Surely this is one of the most lovable super mutants in the series. Number 2, Nick Valentine, Fallout 4. Nick Valentine is a synth, but there's no secret about that. The poor guy is one of the early models, and he's showing his age in the form of broken skin and exposed machinery. But he's one of the most trusted figures in the entire Commonwealth, and is always willing to go out of his way to help clients. Sadly for Nick, as much good as he does those who seek his services, he himself is haunted by the ghosts of the past. Nick Valentine has the memories of a pre-war police officer who was hot on the trail of crime boss Eddie Winter. Unamused by Nick's meddling in his affairs, Eddie killed Nick's wife. Now in the post-apocalypse, this unfortunate robot carries the emotional and deeply personal pain of a wrong he can never correct. Nick's story is one of the best in the entire series, and it gets better with the Far Harbor DLC in which we meet his brother. If we choose to, and if Nick trusts us enough, we can work with him to find some degree of closure, and though it's a little difficult to swallow that both Winter and all of the clues needed to find him happened to survive the apocalypse, it's worth suspending disbelief for the sake of helping the good detective finally close his own case.
Number 1. Veronica, Fallout New Vegas. Veronica is arguably the most rounded, realistic character in a game famous for its rounded and realistic characters. A scribe with the Brotherhood of Steel, Veronica is walled off on all sides from what she wants. In fact, there's a literal wall as well, as Elder McNamara enforces a strict isolationist doctrine for this chapter of the Brotherhood. Veronica recognizes this correctly as an attitude that prevents the Brotherhood from accomplishing its mission of seeking out old world technology, and all but ensures that the faction will die out quickly. So far she's been unable to convince him of this, and as a mere scribe she doesn't have the authority to change his mind.
She could always leave the Brotherhood, but she feels a certain loyalty to them as she was born into the group and they raised her after both of her parents were killed in battle. She doesn't remember the specifics of the battle, as whatever conflict was once important enough to make her an orphan doesn't even merit mention these days. The Brotherhood also forced her to split up with the one true love she's ever had, as the faction is not supportive of same-sex relationships, and Veronica doesn't know where her ex-partner is now, or if they would even remember her.
I don't know where she is now, but I'm sure she's moved on. I still think about her though, once in a while.
While travelling with her, she'll speak of wanting to wear dresses, wanting to be an actress, wanting to live an entirely different life, but with only the very specialised skills the Brotherhood taught her as a scribe, she knows she isn't equipped for survival. There's more to the sadness in Veronica's heart, and you can add more to it if you play the Dead Money DLC and discover that her former mentor became a murderous monster due to his insane greed, but we think we've said enough already. Veronica is a character for whom your decisions feel like they truly matter, and she's also the one, we feel, that most deserves your help.
So there we go, every single Fallout companion ranked from worst to best. Now it's your sacred duty to tell us your own favourites and least favourites in the comments below.
Also, if you have suggestions for other Every X ranked from worst to best videos, let us know. We may use your idea in the future, and you will not be compensated.
You can follow Triple Jump on Twitter here, and while you're at it, why not support the things you enjoy by having a look at our Patreon.
Finally, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. I'm Ben.
And I'm Peter from Triple Jump, and thanks for watching.